We proceed each council meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and a word of prayer. Please feel free to join us.
Sure. If you'll bow with me. Our gracious Father, we thank you for all the abundant blessings that you've given us. We just ask, Lord, that as we enter this meeting, that you give us wisdom, guidance, and help us to conduct business in a manner that is pleasing to you. And we pray, Lord, that at the end of this meeting, that everything that is done is pleasing in your sight. We thank you, Lord, for the city you've blessed us with, and we pray, Lord, that you forever get the glory in everything that we do. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Pruitt? Here. Ms. Mill?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Isbee?
Here.
Okay, you should have received copies of the January 8th, 2019 council agenda. Any comments or corrections?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Before we get into our council meeting tonight, we're starting something a little bit new this year. Every second council meeting of the month, we're going to recognize some of our business partners here in Conway. Some folks that have been putting a lot of young people through college and been paying for a lot of meals here in Conway and been a great asset to our city. And tonight, we're going to start out with two of them that you all know, Verco Manufacturing. Tell you briefly a little bit about Verco. Verco Manufacturing was founded in Los Angeles, California in 1990. Mr. Julian Virtue. 4 years later, Verco had achieved significant success and gained a number of customers in the Midwest and on the East Coast. New schools were being built in growing communities all across America, and Julian felt it made sense to have a factory closer to his customers. After a nationwide search for factories with a good location, he settled on Conway, Arkansas as his best choice. 65 years later, Verco is still here in Conway. The company's three factories there occupy 1,750,000 square feet and employ over 800 people full-time and temporary American workers. Verco also operates a 500,000 square foot factory and distribution center in California that's located within 10 miles of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Verco is the nation's largest manufacturer and distributor of educational furniture with a number of proprietary designs and patents and a strong record of environmental stewardship and regulatory compliance. Just FYI, Verco is hiring seasonal employees right now. So, Verco, for 65 years, you have been here in Conway, Arkansas, and you have, as I said, you've put a lot of people to work here in Conway. You've fed a lot of people. You've put a lot of young folks through college, and we're so glad you're in Conway, Arkansas. This is just a small token of our appreciation for what you've done here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chris Wilson, and your title, Chris, is Director of Manufacturing. Thank you. Next up is a name that you all are very familiar with, George Covington, Covington Properties. Covington Properties employs 70 people here in Conway, Arkansas. They've been in Conway since 1923 when the roofing company was started. Wow. 5 generations of this family has worked for the company, which is, according to George, is really cool for us. Covington companies consist of roofing, construction, property rental, real estate, and classic auto sales. If you've ever been to, you need to go see his classic cars. There's something to see. They do commercial roofing all over Arkansas for many different contractors. And their construction company works on many remodel building projects for Covington as well for others here in Conway. They've remodeled several buildings around town and are currently remodeling the old Linen King and Polygon buildings. They rent out commercial space in several downtown apartments in Conway, and they have over 1.75 million square feet of property. They love getting to work with their tenants, and if anyone ever needs property, we would love to help them. We have a real estate group that can sell property, and a classic auto sales company, which also sells antique autos that have been restored. And they are always hiring quality individuals. George, not only have you guys been great partners with the city of Conway, but downtown Conway's got your fingerprints all over. You
Yep.
have done so much for downtown Conway, so much for our city, and we are glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
We have so many great businesses and industries here in Conway, we're gonna start trying to recognize them. And finally, for your enjoyment tonight, this young lady came to us last year and quoted some Bible verses for us. Tonight, I know you're here, right there. Sydney Thompson is going to recite the I Have a Dream speech of Dr. Martin Luther King.
All right.
Cool. I'll tell you what, let's see. Can you reach that right there?
Yes, sir.
Turn it loose.
I am so happy to join with you today in celebrating and remembering what went down in history. As the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation, at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., August 28, 1963. Over 70 years ago, a great American, Abraham Lincoln, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This decree came as a great beacon of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared by injustice. But 155 years later, the Negro is still not free. 155 years later, the life of the Negro is still crippled by segregation and discrimination. 155 years later, the Negro still lives in poverty. 155 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize and highlight this shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to cash a check when the architects wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. They were signing a promissory note. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as their citizens of color are concerned. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us freedom and justice. We have also come to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is freedom and equality. 2019 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will not be content will have a rude awakening as the nation returns to business as usual. Rest and tranquility will be in America until the Negro is given his full citizenship rights. Revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until justice emerges. But there is something I must say to my people. We must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not drink from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must conduct our struggle with dignity and discipline. We must not allow our protests to degenerate into physical violence. We must need physical force with soul force, economic strategies, and faith. We must not distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. We must march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who ask civil rights champions, when will you people be satisfied? But we can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the horrible police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as they tell us we hung ourselves in a jail cell in Texas for being pulled over for a minor traffic violation. We cannot be satisfied as long as we are shot in the back while running away from the police. We cannot be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their life and dignity while walking home from the store with the hoodie on. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Some of you have come here today out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells and unemployment lines. Some of you have come from places where your quest for freedom must be battered by the storms of persecution. But I say to you today, my friends, continue to work with the faith. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to your neighborhoods and your communities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let's not wallow in the valley of despair. But I say to you today, my friends, even though I face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is the faith that I will go back home with. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning. My country, his of thee. Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my father sat and loved the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from Georgia, Tennessee, New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from Mississippi, Conway, Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas. And when this happens, and when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city and every nation, we'll be able to lift up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Yay.
All right.
That's fantastic, young lady.
That was
is
very
fantastic.
impressive, Sydney. Very, very moving. Outstanding. Thank you so much. All right, our first order of business for this meeting is the approval of the monthly financial report ending December 31st, 2018. Mr. Winningham.
Follow that.
Yeah.
No, isn't that the truth?
I forget my birthday sometimes.
Not a note one, did she?
Man, that was...
Yeah, that was something.
That's unbelievable.
2018 turned out to be a pretty good year for us. First, I'm going to point your attention to page 2, the fund balance appropriations. We appropriated almost $1.2 million during the year of things that just come up. They come up every year. We don't anticipate them. We don't budget for them. Even with that, go back to the first page. Our revenues really just did great for us in 2018. That bottom line number, the 1.8 million, it won't be that when it's all said and done after we go through audit and have adjustments made. But in 2017, after audit, that number was about 1.5 million. And I don't anticipate that to change substantially. I think we'll end up putting another 1.5 to 1.8 million back into the general fund reserve when it's all said and done. Just a couple of things to point out. Sales tax for the year ended up being just under 4.5%. You can see there 104% collected. That was about 4.4. For the month, it was up almost 7%.
Wow.
Over same month last year. Beverage tax, even though it's not a lot of money, it performed well, which is an indicator of our economy. The alcohol sales in restaurants, franchise fees perform well for us. Permits, building permits, that's a real strong indicator of our economy that folks are building in town. People are moving in, commercial development's happening, all good signs. I'll talk a little bit more than I usually do since we're looking at the end of the year now. That's all I've got on the general fund unless anybody has any comments or questions before I move on. Flip over to the street fund. Street fund added about $350,000 to their reserves at the end of 2018. The half-cent sales tax turnback there got close to hitting 1.5 million on it. Collected about 23% over what we budgeted there. And those are funds that go straight to the repair of streets in town. Right below that, severance tax. Good grief, I missed that revenue number. Bad. Budgeted 75,000, collected almost 150. We adjusted that for 2019. Hopefully we'll, it's a good. I'm glad to miss it like that.
Right.
Because it was sure in 2017 it was not performing that well at all. Anything on street fund before we move forward? Sanitation, the numbers don't look as good there, bottom line numbers anyway. Our revenues were good, up 5% over budget. That interest income, you can say I missed that one pretty good too. The balance in that bank account got so big. We were up around $11–12 million before we purchased the federal building and did a couple other things, and that's the reason that just kind of jumped up there and snuck up and jumped on us. Once your balance starts growing, that interest number can creep up on you in a hurry. And we also, our rate went up, I believe, with Centennial.
Getting a very good rate.
Yeah. So that's all good things. That other operating cost, you can see where we went over there. That was the transfer to the general fund for the purchase of the federal building. We didn't go back and amend that budget. We probably should. We'll get you an appropriation ordinance at the next meeting, get that cleaned up going forward so we don't get our hands slapped by Mr. Auditor. Anything there council would like to discuss before we move on to the airport? Airport, negative bottom line there, but they had reserves to cover it. They've had good years ever since the airport has been a separate fund for us. It's a well-run operation out there. Fuel sales lagged behind their budget number, but as we've talked about before, that's never gonna hurt us because we're buying it at wholesale and we're selling it at a profit margin. So you can see there, we always single out that fuel for resale expenditure amount where you can compare those two numbers easily each month. And then the last page, our major project funds, excuse me, nothing really big to talk about there. All those balances are stayed fairly steady through the year. With the exception of that A&P tax, we had started getting some pretty good bills towards the end of the year on the pedestrian overpass over Dave Ward. And that's, but still, end of the year with a little over $1 million in the bank in that account. All in all, it's a good year for the city.
Make a motion to approve the monthly financials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financial report ending December 31st, 2018. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Wayne. Before we proceed with our agenda, I would like to ask the council if we could suspend the rules and insert Mr. Tisdale in at this time.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All any opposed? Mr. Tisdale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is John Tisdale. I'm an attorney in Little Rock with a firm called Wright, Lindsay, and Jennings. We represent and have for a number of years USABLE and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Back in October of 2012, the city approved a taxable bond issue to be used for the benefit of Blue Cross Blue Shield. They built about a $13.5 million data storage, data processing facility on Ledge Lawn in Conway. They brought about 30, at that time, about 30 new jobs into the city. It was a taxable bond issue. The monies were provided by Centennial Bank, who bought the bonds. The city owned the building and the land at the time. You leased it to Blue Cross Blue Shield for enough to pay off the bonds over the years, and those bonds paid off right at the end of 2018. So in the terms of the lease that was signed at the time, Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield, USABLE, has an option to buy the facility for an additional payment of $100,000. They have exercised that option. I sent to Mr. Clausen the notice of the exercise and a draft of a special warranty deed to be executed by the city, which will transfer ownership of that facility and the underlying property to U.S. Able and Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's going to stay here in the city. They're not moving out. They'll continue to have the jobs here, but it now will go on the tax rolls to be assessed for real and personal property tax, and probably will make the financials that he just talked about look a little better in years to come.
Said 100,000.
Yeah, Mr. Tisdale, I think you said 100,000, but it's just
I mean, $100, $100. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't get.
It's like
Yeah, no, that's.
We like the first number.
That was my fault. Yes.
Just want to clarify.
But it is an option price of $100 since they had paid over the years all of the costs to acquire the land and build the building. Any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
What we need to do on this.
I think a motion to approve and then.
Make a motion to approve that.
Second.
We have a motion and motion and a second to approve the warranty deed change over from Blue Cross to U.S. Able Corporation.
No, it's basically we're giving them a warranty
Yeah,
deed.
Warranty deed, okay, all right, all right.
City to give U.S. Able Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Okay, all right. We're glad that the jobs are staying in Conway, by the way.
They definitely will, and I will work with the city attorney, get the check up here from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and exchange that for the deed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Tisdale. All right, we're back on track here. First up, we have our standing committee, starting with Community Development. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on this portion of the agenda is consideration to approve the nomination of Patricia Blenko to the Conway Housing Authority Board. This was forwarded to us by the board after their annual meeting on January 14th of this year, and I move that we accept that nomination.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the nomination, Ms. Patricia, for the Conway Housing Authority Board. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to request that the Faulkner County tax collector, place a lien on property at 2137 Poplar as a result of incurred expenses by the city. $176.28 is what we are out at this point in time. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 2137 Poplar in Conway with us this evening? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone, so we do have a resolution for this item. It's Resolution R1903.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for expenses incurred by the city. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to amend Ordinance 01856 to clarify the subdivision regulations for intersections and alignment. And, well, yeah, Finley, you want to come up and talk
Mr.
about
Vincent.
this? Thank you.
Mr. Walden is at Cub Scouts, I believe, tonight. So I offered to handle
That's a good
this for
place.
him. There are only two things that you'll see. The last, or the paragraph D of section 1, which is indented there, is the paragraph that is going to be changed in the subdivision ordinance. The only change is actually, that's not an addition, it's just a change. And I'll tell you the two things that are changing. The first is the words four-way intersections. Right now that's not included. So it just applies to all intersections. And I recognized this oversight the first time this applied to a three-way or a T intersection, and recognized that there was little chance of a roundabout probably happening at a T intersection, so we didn't need 100-foot radii at a T intersection. So James and I agreed that it probably made sense to amend this and only require these larger radii at four-way intersections. The other is that not all intersections in Conway, most but not all, are at 90-degree angles. So we've added the very last sentence to allow for some change, some variation from these rules in the instance that it's not a 90-degree angle at the intersection.
I make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Our
Passes
ordinance number?
7-0. I'm sorry, Mr. Conway.
Our ordinance number, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor.
01908.
08, thank you.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you,
Passes
Council.
7-0. Thank you, Finley. Mr. Hawkins.
Finley, do you want to stay close? Sure. We got some, Jamie might do this as well. I'm sorry, Jamie.
needs me.
Okay. Ms. Bryce, it would be you. We have consideration to approve annual bids for materials and services for the Transportation Department. I saw Transportation Department, Ms. Bryce, and I just immediately think of.
We work as a team.
I-
It's fine.
I apologize. So what can you tell us?
We would like you to approve the lowest on 5 bids for the Transportation Department. They're listed there for gravel, concrete pipe, concrete work, ready mix, and gas and diesel.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second, to approve the annual bids for Transportation Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Final item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds and approving professional services for intersection improvements for the Transportation Department. And Ms. Bryce, since you're standing there, are you going to take this one as well?
I will take some. If there are technical questions, we can ask Finley, but we did take RFQs for engineers and would like you to approve McClellan to study these 6 intersections.
I make a motion we waive the 3 readings tonight.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second, to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Mr. Ledbetter, did that have the intersection on it?
Yes.
Okay, good deal.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take a motion to adopt the ordinance unless there's any further questions.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second, to adopt this ordinance. If there are no further discussion, Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Hey, Mayor, could
Yes, ma'am.
y'all mention those intersections
Yes.
publicly so people will be aware of what we're looking at?
I can call them off if
Go ahead.
if you want. College and Ferris, Tyler and Salem, Salem and Irby, Prince and Country Club, College and Prince and Hogan.
Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next, we have our Public Service Committee, starting out with an ordinance appropriating grant funds received from the Arkansas Parks and Tourism Department for our Parks and Recreation Department. Miss Candy,
I'm going to do this for Steve.
why'd you let Steve throw that off on you?
Well, I just was being nice. This is the ordinance that will be the closeout of the splash pad at Laurel Park. And once we close this out, we'll be able to pick a new project. Parks and Tourism wants to work with us. Steve's group was just number 1. They just did
Did a good
everything
job.
right. So
Number 1 where?
they really were. I'm telling you, they don't see that a whole lot. So, and the other thing is, wanted to mention that we started off the new year very nicely. We got an award for $178,000 to continue the Stone Dam Creek Trail from the Mimosa Trailhead to Donaghy. So that's going to be a
Good.
big chunk there
Good.
that we'll get to do. And then we're open for suggestions. We got a long list we've got going. If you got things you want to do, let's run it through the mayor and, we'll all get together and figure out what our next project is and use the funds accordingly. So, and it's just nice to be back. I tell you what, City Hall is a wonderful place.
We're
Meet
glad to
people there.
have you.
Seriously.
Thank you, Candy.
Thank you.
And let me tell you something, she has hit the ground running. We can't.
Slow her down.
I stopped in that night at
down.
6 o'clock, and Jamie and Candy and Felicia were all still in there working, talking about grants. So we're so glad to have you back.
Thank you very much. I'm
Yes.
glad to be back. Thank you.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and I have it as 10.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Next up, we have an ordinance appropriating funds for the bike share program with Zagster for the Parks and Recreation Department. Mr. Ibbotson, we have your name on this one.
This is our third and final appropriation under this contract for Zagster. Looking at, with a donation from Baptist Medical of $20,000 and revenues generated should about wash this year's donation, or this year's contract amount.
It's been a very popular program. It's done quite well.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Move for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, indeed. At the end, since this is the last payment, are these bikes staying here? Is that?
That was my understanding. Finley, do you know any different than that?
I think we purchased the bikes for this amount. I think it's
Just rent.
lease, so if we didn't get another 3-year contract, then they'd come get them.
Yeah, that's what I would think too.
I could not remember, and that's the reason I asked the question. Thank
But
you.
it has been very popular.
It has been popular.
Very well for.
And I'd say we need to think about putting that back in the budget
I do too.
next year.
Get someone to sponsor. Yeah. Baptist might want to do it again, or some other ones.
I'll look into that. Let's,
Okay.
let's see what it's gonna take to renew
It's
that.
worth the
Right.
conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
It is.
Start it now.
Yeah, it is. It's been very
I
popular.
hear good things about it.
Anytime I'm out on the bike pathway, there's always folks out there riding.
Yeah, yeah.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
The ordinance 01911. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Ibbotson.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration to enter into an amended donation and easement agreement with the South Ridge Properties for the Parks and Recreation Department. This will be Mr. Ibbotson and Mr. Clausen. And this is an amended agreement for the land we need for the trails. And Chuck's been working on this.
Yeah, we've got Mr. Levin here, if you want to kind of approach too. We had an entity issue, I guess is basically the best way to put it. There was a triangular piece of property that was donated to the city, or attempted to be donated to the city last year. I guess it was the property attached to the South Ridge Properties. It's on South Donaghy, and I'll kind of let you take it how we got working on this again.
Agreed. First of all, Richard Levin, I'm an attorney with Hall Estel, and if she comes back again, wherever she is, you have a job as an attorney in the law firm. You're in. I don't know how you follow that at all. This is a parcel. Elizabeth Blankenship is here. She's the managing member of South Ridge Properties. It's a 3.05 acre donation to the city of Conway. And what it really does is allow for that parcel to be utilized hopefully someday for a trailway and a continuation. And you're correct. What we did was we had to amend the name of the ownership entity as it is today, which is South Ridge Properties. So we're offering this for donation to the city of Conway.
Any other questions? Chuck, you have anything else to add to that?
I sure don't.
I make a motion, we enter into this amended donation and easement agreement.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this agreement. Any further discussion or questions? Mr. Garrett?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0.
I'd be foolish if I didn't say thank you to Mr. Clausen, to you, Mayor, and to the Planning and Development Group that helped so much in putting this together. There was a lot of work that went into this. It sounds really simple, but it wasn't in the beginning, and it turned out to be simple in the end. So thank you for all your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen, for all your work on this. Next, we have consideration to approve the proposal for our youth sports uniforms for the Parks and Recreation Department, Mr. Ibbotson and Ms. Bryce.
have a memo in front of you. We received RFPs for our sports uniforms this year, and we received a total of 4 proposals and asking you to approve the lowest bid.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this bid for our youth sports uniform for the Parks and Recreation Department. Any further discussion?
Everybody had their pins sharp. That's good.
It
They
is.
did. They were really close.
That's a good thing. It's all competitive.
If not, Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Thank you. Thanks for the hard work, guys.
Yes.
Next, we have an ordinance accepting and appropriating grant funds for the Animal Welfare Unit. Chief Spradlin.
There's Sean.
Okay, Shauna. Pass it on down, Jody. That boy.
Almost. Felt like, did we skip something? Anyway, hi, how are y'all?
Hi, how are you?
How y'all doing?
Good.
Good.
Happy New Year.
Everybody have a good Christmas, good New Year? Good.
I appreciate y'all coming out and picking up the rabbits. That was,
Of course, we're gonna bring them back though, so.
I don't need them.
They're show rabbits.
We've yet to figure out where they're coming from.
It's crazy.
That's 3 of them that's shown up.
Anybody want a rabbit?
Well, 2 have shown up at
Where
our
did
house and 1 at our neighbor's house. These big
wow.
flop-eared show rabbits. And so far, Shauna has been able to adopt them out.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
So they're coming back to the original.
I don't know. I think
Owners
I think folks have just figured out if you drop them off at the mayor's house, they'll get adopted. Anyway, Shauna.
Okay, so this isn't a grant, this is a grant that was obtained from the ASPCA. This grant is to change the chemicals that we currently use at the shelter, something that is used in zoos and more appropriately in veterinary clinics and things like that. Before we decided to take the leap and switch to this product, we checked out the product first and actually bought like a small container up to try it out. So these monies will cover a 55-gallon drum of the material, all the hoses and brushes and things that go along with it, the delivery system, all of that is included in that, and that's what this grant covers. Any monies that are left over are to be guided to the spay-neuter account. So just one of the many grants that we've gotten from the ASPCA.
Make a motion, we waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance number 12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
7-0.
Thank
you. Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you.
Your folks were very helpful.
Thank you.
Chuck, ASPCA's misspelled on top. It's ASCPA on the top of it.
Thank you. Yep. Next, we have an ordinance appropriating fiscal year 2018 funds for administrative overages. Mr. Winningham.
We have a small handful of more unforeseen expenditures from 2018. Briefly mention them there in the whereas. I'll talk a little bit about them. Property tax, the lion's share, that's the $26,000 amount. The lion's share of that is property taxes on the hangars at the airport because they are revenue income generating properties to individuals. In years past, we had been exempt. We had received an exemption for those properties. Now we no longer do. So we have to pay that bill. The other, the $18,700, that is the bond arbitrage preparation fees. Those just come up hit or miss depending on the year in relation to the year the bonds were issued. There's 5-year calculations, 7-year, 3-year preliminary. We contract with, they're not Thomas & Thomas anymore, but it was Thomas & Thomas CPA firm. They handle those for us. They're the top firm in the state that handles those calculations. You remember in 2017, we refinanced the A&P bonds. So there was an initial calculation due on that we paid for in 2018. And then we had some other bond issues that were due for calculations. Then the smallest amount, $7,000, that was, we had to insure the federal building after we completed that purchase. typically in the budget, we'll have some room to cover these sorts of things. In 2018, we didn't. It was a pretty tight year for us expenditure-wise, so that's why we're asking the council to clean this up.
Did the law change on those taxes?
You want to handle that one, Mr. Clausen? I don't.
Mr. Gordon, Wilburn here for the bond issue questions, or the tax issue.
Well, the property taxes.
On the taxation of that?
Property taxes at the airport.
Yes, well, it's complicated. Hang on. The law didn't change, but the application of the law did.
Okay, break that
Answer your
down
question.
so I can understand it.
So the city enjoys exemption for property taxes when city-owned property is used exclusively for public use. When we're leasing property to private entities for only their purposes, then it really becomes a taxable event at that point. So that's what that is.
And in years past, we had been granted an exemption for that, and then there was personnel changes in the assessors, collectors, treasurer's offices, and they decided to reevaluate that and no longer grant us that exemption.
I make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance number 13.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Winningham.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I don't know the answer to this either, so that's the reason for the question. Did anyone in Conway get a license for a dispensary, a marijuana dispensary? Do y'all know? I do not know.
Ooh, I haven't heard anything.
I don't think so. There more than likely will be one.
Okay, okay. What's the and the reason I would like for you to stay, what's the tax situation on that? Can we tax that locally, or is that a state deal?
I think standard sales tax would apply. As far as any other issue with the city that we're concerned about, I mean, they're going to be zoned like a pharmacy. But yeah, I think that they're going to have state tax and then sales tax here too, I believe.
So you think local sales tax will be?
I think that's right.
Okay.
And we've been given an address. It really is all we've been given at this time.
Okay, okay.
Just a quick story on that. A couple weeks ago, there was a article in the business section of the Sunday paper about the environment in Canada after they legalized it, and they were thinking, oh, now that it's legal, all the people that buy it on the street are not going to go into stores. We're going to have all this tax revenue. Well, the way Canada set it up, the government runs all the stores, so the dealers don't have any way to now sell it legally. Was the gist of it. So people that used to buy it off the street pretty much still buy it off the street. There's not a lot of activity going in the stores and not a lot of tax revenue flowing from
But
that.
in Colorado, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's different there.
Colorado and California is completely different.
We'll leave that recreational.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying,
Right.
just saying. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Winningham. And under new business, that has already been taken care of. Would like to ask you to suspend the rules one more time. Mr. Raines from the Municipal League is here. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilkerson. John Wilkerson from the Municipal League is here to talk about the Raines versus City of Conway. We also have 3 of our officers in attendance here tonight. Mr. Wilkerson. John, I don't know how many times I've called your name.
Right, I know.
I apologize for calling you Mr. Raines. My
So
apologies.
moved, Mayor. So
Second.
moved if you need it.
Yes.
Suspend the rules.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So I lead off every time that I come here to remind you that I'm a Conway boy. I'm Wampus Cat and a Purple Bear. So I want to introduce the officers with you that are with us today. Officer Culliford, Officer Birmingham, and Officer Burrow. And then also Bree Gibson, who's a brand new lawyer with the Municipal League, and I'll get to why she's here in just a quick second. I'm here to just really give you an update. Last time I came in front of you, I told you that we had a petition pending at the Supreme Court, and then I'd come back to you to sort of give you the update on what that came out, how that came out. It did not turn out favorably. The Supreme Court turned down our petition for cert. I'm still at a loss for why, but we are here where we are, and where we are is we're facing trial February 25th. Just quick, the reason Bree is here is that I got promoted to general counsel of the Municipal League about 6 or 7 months ago, and so I am now full-time general counsel, and with the legislative session, I won't be able to try the case. But Bree will be, and so is the attorney that really taught me what I know about shooting trials. Keith Wren will be on the case, so we're all well represented, and we all have the same opinion of the case that we always have.
John, I messed your flow up, but just by way so you understand the structure of the league, he's been promoted to general counsel, which was Mark Hayes' position, and now Mark is the director.
Yeah, I'm the new Mark Hayes, shorter but better looking is what I tell everybody. That joke did not go over well last week, but I'm glad it went over well today. So the Supreme Court denied the petition. I know we've suffered setbacks in this case, losing the motions, losing the appeal, not losing at the Supreme Court, but not winning at the Supreme Court. It does not change my belief in what the officers did one little bit. They did the absolute right thing. They're faced with a very dangerous situation, a very volatile situation, and both under the law, they did the right thing, but also just as common sense, they did the right thing, and they tried to handle this situation as safely as they possibly could, and Mr. Rain chose not to handle it the same way. And so they were put, like officers often are, they're put in a very difficult position, and they were playing the cards that they were dealt, and they had no control of the situation, even though they really tried to. And Mr. Rains approached them with a knife, and approached Officer Hanson, Ms. Straley, with a knife, and they used deadly force to stop her from getting stabbed. And I can say this, and Bree and I actually did a sort of a mock-up to get her up to speed on the case. And when we ran through it with her as Officer Hanson, I really got a feel for if these 3 officers would not have been there, Officer Hanson would have been killed. I believe that wholeheartedly, that they saved her life. And so I come to you again just to give you an update, make sure that we're on the same page in the hymnal here. And I believe in what they did. And I've seen a lot of cases come through my desk in 13 years, and I believe in what these officers did. I can't guarantee anything, but they did absolutely the right thing, and I stand behind him 110% like I always have. So that's where I am. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, but we are going to trial, so we're looking down the barrel of that, and that's where we are. If there's any questions.
What court will this be in?
Federal District Court in Little Rock, Judge Jay Moody. 12-member jury. All 12 have to agree that the officers were wrong to find them liable. All 12 have to agree that they weren't wrong to find them not to be liable. One juror that believes in these guys will hang up the jury, and vice versa. One juror that doesn't believe in these guys will hang up the jury. But hung juries are not very common. It'll get resolved, barring the federal government being shut down, which is becoming a real concern as we go down this day 35 or whatever we're at. So, but that's where we are.
Quick question: If it comes down to a hung jury, you think they will retry it? You don't know.
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you what I would advise. I would probably come back to you and say, hey, listen, we know where we are now. We know it's a close call. It's a closer call than I would have thought. And now the plaintiffs know too. So let's talk about trying to get this taken care of. Because right now the offer is at $1 million. There's no way I would advise that you settle for that amount.
That's their offer to us.
That's their offer to us. That's their final offer to us as of right now. And I bring settlement up real quick. I am not closing the door on that, but as of right now, I don't advise that we make any moves. We see what the hospital is going to do. And I've spoken to these 3 officers. They believe in what they did. Mm-hmm. And they don't want even the implication that they did something wrong. So they're willing to go all the way, and we're hitched to the same wagon. And we're ready to go and defend these good officers. So,
well, one of the things I wanted to say too is, again, commend the officers for the actions they took in a split second. That they relied on their training and reaction, and not even that, but they did the most heroic thing. They used they made that decision. That's something that they've got to live with, but they did it in defense of someone else, in defense of one of our other officers. So again, commend them for what they did. I appreciate them having to go through this whole process. I know it's not been enjoyable for them. They've got a great legal team that's working with them. Obviously, my office has been involved, and we stayed on top of it. The chief, of course, has been great. The last time we were here, we brought this offer to you, and I think that kind of the decision that the council made was to let's just kind of wait. We're still barreling down to trial, which we're even more so full head of steam right now. Negotiations are always on the table if we feel that it's necessary. Like John said, they're not going to close the door on anything, but let our legal team prepare for trial and just see. I think that that's where that's where I would advise right now. Let's just see. These officers are aware of the risk of going to trial. Obviously, we know, we've talked about it, the risk of going to trial. Anything can happen, but as strongly as everyone believes in the decisions that they made and the training that they were given, I think this is more of an update than anybody having to make any decisions.
Right. And I'll say this too, you have, I would say this in front of North Little Rock, who I consider to be a fantastic police department. You have the best police department in the state. I really believe that. And it's not just because I'm from Conway, but you train your officers incredibly well. You are a gold standard, and these guys are no exception. So I commend all of y'all for all your great work for my hometown. So thank you.
Let's stand with our guys.
Absolutely.
Stand with our guys.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, we're gonna stand with you.
Yep.
Absolutely. Chief Spradlin, appreciate the job that you and your department does.
Sure.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
That's all we have. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.